Howdy, howdy. You're listening to Dog People, podcast about the Japanese punk bands Going Steady and Ging Nang Boyz. My name is Bob, and I'm here with Adam Passion out in Nagoya. What's up, Adam?
Hey, hey, hey!
And I'm here with Mike, all the way from our hometown, San Ho. Say what up, Mike.
What up, everybody?
Today we're talking about the new Ging Nang Boyz album, Nee Minna Daisuki da yo. Came out a few weeks ago. These are our first impressions. And first of all, I just want to start off with, what do you guys think? What's the verdict? Mike, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'll go first. I love this record. I think it's a really cool record that picks up from the last one in an interesting way. To me, everything after those first two Ging Nang Boyz records feels a little bit like Mineta in some kind of deep personal turmoil, in a way, like a very dark night of the soul. Especially this last record feels very much like ripping apart a lot of the previous music and burying it in a ton of noise and a ton of just like almost like an effort to turn off previous fans. Whereas this one feels like a little bit of a return to his songwriting prowess in a way, like his really kind of ungarnished good songwriting skills. He's a really great melody writer, and that really comes through in this. And as we've talked about in the past, he's extremely good at picking and choosing little bits of music from all kinds of backgrounds and using them to create a really emotional space. And I think it works really well in this record. Adam, what do you think?
I was both surprised and not surprised by this one in a couple ways. So like, I had been listening to the singles, as they had been coming out. And in this, on this album, I think 5 of the songs or so came out as singles or as, video exclusives. So, those ones. And then the other songs that are on there are remakes of, old Going Steady songs or something like that. So there's not a whole lot of new material, but I was way happier with it than I expected to be. So when Door and Kimi to Boku came out, I was totally shocked, and it took me forever to get used to it. Or not forever, it took me a little while to get used to them. And once I did, I really, really loved them. That's probably my favorite of their work. But then when, Beach and Hikari ni Tatete ne, or whatever that one's called, when those ones came out, those ones shocked me in a very different way.
If I could interject super quick, I love the moments of the podcast where we're clearly unprepared for discussing this band.
Yeah, because we haven't looked up the actual titles.
Usually it's me.
Yeah, so those albums shocked me in a different way. And so like this one, I was really like nervous about it, to be honest, going into it. I was thinking, am I going to hate this? Or am I going to like it? Or, I didn't know what I was going to feel like. But honestly, not only the songwriting, but the way that the album is constructed, the way that it's set, it's very similar to the way the old ones used to be, where you have like long ballads, and then you have a few little poppy songs mixed in, and you have the one like introspective, very sparse song, and then like 50s kind of pop inspired stuff. And it has like the same general flow as the old albums had. So I do feel like this is really going back to an older era of Ging Nang Boyz in some ways, in the architecture of the album.
Yeah, I went into it not expecting to like it as much as I did. And I feel like I'm kind of like naturally hard-coded as a hater. I think I was extra harsh on the last 2 albums because I was like, man, they're on some like weirdo shit, and I think they're not pulling it off. And I just I didn't like a lot of the singles. And I remember watching the Hone music video and being like, man, what is this bullshit? So I was pleasantly surprised where when I listened to this record, I was like, dude, I love most of the songs. Even Hone, like I love the new recording. I feel like this record really captured like good performances. Like I think Mineta incorporates a lot of pop songwriting tricks that are kind of shameless, but they work really well just with his chord selection or the way he structures a song. I think there's a big Britpop vibe through a lot of the record. And, Ichigo no Uta is actually probably my favorite Ging Nang Boyz song since I Don't Want to Die. Like, I think I like it more than anything on the last record. I think it's just a really great, straightforward pop punk song. But there's a couple moments that I'm not so hot on this record, but we'll probably get into it as we go along.
Yeah.
But the biggest drawback for me is actually hearing parts of the record and imagining how much better it would have been if it were Abiko playing an album-long bass solo as he does, or just imagining how Chin's slightly more unhinged guitar playing would really open up a part. And the part in particular I'm thinking of is there's a part in Hone where Mineta's singing about jumping from the tip top of Tokyo Tower, and a backing vocal echoes what he's singing. And I'm just imagining, what if that were Abiko's voice, and how great it would be hearing those two voices doing their thing together again.
Yeah, this record is kind of a different beast in a way, because as far as I know, it's just Mineta and then like hired hands. Does anybody know anything about anybody else on the album?
The little bit I know is one of the guys played in this band, Andy Mori, and I think the guitarist is like one of these like YouTube shredders where he just like posts videos like, "Hey guys, I shred." But I don't really know anything beyond that. I don't know any of their names, which maybe it's kind of shameful to say.
Shameful or telling, yeah.
Specifically to talk about this record.
I do feel like maybe they were like, all the other guys had their own personality and their own like following. I think there was, there were different factions of people who, it's almost like the, like the George fans and the Paul fans and kind of thing. Like I think that there were people who liked certain members more than others. And now that they're all kind of gone, it really is kind of a one-man show. With these guys who are, I feel almost like they may have been selected just because they don't ever upstage him in a sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's deliberate, but
I could feel that though, even if it's not a deliberate thing. I feel that.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like the performances are pretty like reined in. Nobody really like draws attention to themselves very much. But the playing is all really like to the song, I think. Like the reference points in this record, I think, are generally more like what people would call mature, I suppose, than previous ones. Like less pop punk and more like jangle pop kind of references and Britpop references, and then like bits of the current kind of like shoegazy black metal on the new version of Don't Trust Over 30. Otono Zentetsu, is that what it's called? Zenmetsu.
Adult Annihilation, something like that.
Yeah, which, by the way, is a really amazing reworking of that song. That's the first song on the first Going Steady record, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so going, like, on this record, he's going back to the very first one. And in a way, Adam, like you were talking about, it almost seems like with none of the other members drawing any attention or any of the other members being like present at all, it's almost like the return to the Ging Nang Boyz when it was just Mineta, when it was before those records came out, when it was just an album of, or a song of Mineta pouring his heart out, just screaming unaccompanied. And in some ways, this record feels a little bit like that, like this kind of like pouring out of his heart. He says so often in it, like, "This is my song." And it feels like this really like honest kind of outpouring from one person in a way.
Yeah, I feel like this is the most personal album of theirs for sure. And everything has some aspect of him very, very directly and very personally. And I feel like there's a lot less, it's more like just directly there. There's not any kind of artifice or anything. It's just him directly saying things, even sometimes not necessarily artfully, almost a blunt kind of way. And there's other times where I have no idea what the hell he's saying. And I thought it might be me. I thought it might be my lack of understanding the language, but playing it for, my wife and kids were like, I have no idea what the fuck he's talking about. Like, so I'm thinking about a very specific time in the album where he's talking about, I think it's in the song Ikitai, where he's saying like the fog of the ceiling kind of clears and there's a small woman there and she's saying, whatever. Like there's like a really weird part like there where it's just kind of nonsense, but Bob, if I can say one thing, you mentioned this song, Ichigo no Uta, and I never mentioned this earlier, even though this single came out in 2019, but this is kind of a justification for Yumiko. I remember you and Yumiko talking about, she said the word daijobanai, and you're like, that's not a word. Daijobu is not a verb. You don't change it like that. And she was like, no, it is. And this totally, he says that in this one, right? Like daijobanai kedo daijobu.
Yeah. I'm sure I was just playing devil's advocate, just being a dork, but I really love that's become a thing, like people just playing with language. And I'm far from fluent in Japanese, but I like understanding Japanese enough to recognize people playing with the language. Like that's like the real fluency with the language, like being able to make nonsense words up, like bing bong, whatever. Like, and I love being clued in just to that one at least a little bit. Like, oh yeah, I get this play on words.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's really a good turn of phrase too. I think it's one of the best turns of phrases on the record, which is like a sign of a great pop song.
Yeah. That reminds me of so like my wife and my son both, they always say, if they're disagreeing with each other, like they'll say chigao, which means like you're wrong, right? And then they'll say no, chigawa wa nai, or they'll say chigakunai. And I'm like, chigakunai is not a fucking word. and why am I the one who's telling these two native speakers that chigakunai is not a fucking word?
Well, yeah, the word has been turned from like in that case like a verb into an adjective,
right?
Just like daijobu was turned into from an adjective into a verb, I guess, in Ichigo no Uta. So
right, yeah,
I think that's cool. Like people talk about like adulting and stuff like that in English. So I think it's like, yeah, have fun with the language. Like language is what we make it.
Well, way to shame me there, Bob. I wanted to have the moral high ground there with my words, but.
Let's point out all the differences to the native Japanese speakers.
Yeah. Maybe we can just go through track by track and kind of talk about our impressions of them, if that is cool with you guys.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I thought that these first two tracks, especially, the Do You Like Me, that one, it starts off with that really harsh, hissing, almost kind of feedback kind of sound. And that is the same kind of harsh sound that was all throughout the other two albums that they, the other albums they released, especially on Beach. But
yeah,
there was a lot of that sound even on the Hikari ni Tatete ne. Am I saying that right?
I think it's Hikari no Naka ni.
Hikari no Naka ni Tatete ne. So in both of those albums, there was that sound. And so I almost felt like it was a continuation of a thought. But then it just blasts out with this hardcore 80s style hardcore. And the second song is also like that, The School Pill. And when I heard those two, I was like, man, if this whole album is like this, I was kind of digging it, to be honest. I was like, this is kind of a totally new direction for them to go in.
Like seeing them go full meathead.
Yeah. So, but then even those songs themselves, they don't stay in that tone at all. Like they very quickly become more, I don't know, more Ging Nang Boyz sounding, more poppy. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. Mineta actually talked about that kind of in depth. So he did like an 11-week series every week, this series with a magazine here called Pia, which is actually based here in Nagoya. It's like an entertainment magazine. And so he did a long form interview with them. And in that, he talked about these songs. So he was friends with this guy in high school whose name is Mori-kun. And this guy Mori was really into hardcore at the time. And I think that he was like drawing some like picture in class, like a UK flag or something like that. And this guy Morty saw it and he was like, oh man, you like punk? And it was something simple like that. And he was like, oh yeah, I like punk. And so they end up making this band together and recording these hardcore songs. And it was just this basically he said that he was writing it in that spirit. Like he wanted to make it sound just like he and Morty used to write. And so those first two songs are both kind of a tribute to that. And the reason they are is because he thinks about that as almost like his first love experience. He calls it, like in the interview, he says that it's kind of his hatsukoi. And so for him, like
that's awesome.
His first experience with music was this and that intensity. And so he feels like he's kind of reaching back and trying to capture that initial intensity that he had. especially the second one. He said he wanted to get that feeling where like you don't even bother tuning the guitar. Like you just want to just jump in and play it. And so, yeah, I think both of those songs have that kind of immediacy to them. And they actually work as hardcore songs, to be honest.
Yeah, they do. They work really well. And to your point about the noise that the record starts with, I totally agree. It sounds like lining the record up at the end of the last one almost, or like where you're coming out of the last two into this new experience. Like you're getting kind of the tail end of that previous Ging Nang Boyz kind of period at the very front of this one, and then shooting straight through it out, kind of with this really cathartic hardcore opening. Yeah. Which to me, when Jesse Michaels recently did a art show in Tokyo, and I used to play in Classics of Love with him. And when he was doing it, he hit me up and asked if I knew how to get in touch with Mineta, because Mineta had come to the art show and had introduced himself and said he was a big fan. And it dawned on me as I was listening to these songs that they remind me also a little bit of the most recent Classics of Love stuff that Jesse recently put out. Because Jesse was really trying to go for that like an 80s hardcore kind of sound in Classics, and the most recent EP really sounds like that kind of like Mineta was saying, like you're not even like, don't even bother tuning the guitar, just jump in and start tearing it up kind of energy.
It's a world of harm, world of burning hate. Oligarchs and tyrants are the new effective state. They say the horizon line never will be crossed. A future we ourselves define. So why am I always walking with the boss?
I might have to interject with a slight bit of haterness on these two songs, and that there's a couple things on this record that kind of drive me insane. And I like as mind blowing as those first two Ging Nang Boyz albums were, Door and Kimi to Boku no, I'm kind of over the like everything compressed to hell. It's like everything way too loud, mixing or mastering aesthetic of Mineta's at this point. And I feel like to a certain extent, it actually kind of dulls the danger of some of these songs. Like more and more as the recordings have gone on, Mineta's voice gets louder and louder, and then like the guitars and everything else kind of gets softer and softer. And when I hear hardcore, I kind of imagine you're seeing a show, the instruments are super loud and you can barely hear the vocalist singing because he's singing on a shitty PA, and you hear him screaming more than actually coming through the PA. And I kind of wish these songs sounded more like that, where like the vocals are kind of a little more buried and just kind of the guitars are just crushing you. Like part of me wishes it was more like that.
Yeah, I agree with you, because that's the kind of music I was listening to a lot in high school and stuff as well. So it would have sounded really cool like that. I do think it does grant this kind of weird, it's almost like covering it up or softening it. And it, in that sense, it makes it seem like almost like a memory of music like that, or like, it puts that bit of separation. So if it is in fact that he's trying to conjure up this like lost love, this feeling of first love and stuff, then it makes it sort of like I don't know, like you're looking at it from a distance almost. I don't know if that was intentional. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
I'm inclined to agree with you though, Adam. I feel like the songs like use hardcore, but the way that they do it it's pretty clear it's not trying to be a hardcore song exactly. Like I feel like it's kind of much more like these songs in particular are really like pastiche. Like there's like a lot of things that happen in a really short period of time. Yeah. I feel like he's doing something else a little bit. He's making reference to it in a way, and more than trying to do it. And I hear you, Bob, for sure. But I'm still down with it. I think
I kind of left my thought incomplete earlier too, where I mentioned like the overcompression aesthetic of the actual recording. I feel like it doesn't give anything a chance to breathe, especially in these hardcore songs. It's kind of like the Ging Nang Boyz made things as punk as possible by making everything stupid loud. And I feel like there's been a lot of other good punk bands that have done that. Like you think of like the Stooges with Raw Power, that Exploding Hearts record.
Yeah.
The Guitar Wolf records are all like way too loud, and it kind of works. But I think the other side of Mineta's songwriting yin yang is that he also writes some like real especially on this record, real clean pop songs. So when you're hearing a real clean pop song, like mixed like a nightmare punk record, I think part of me wishes he would just pull back and be like, no, I'm actually just going to embrace this as the clean pop song it should be. And also in a strange way, I brought it up when I was addressing the hardcore songs, but I kind of feel like those songs conversely also, they have the vocals mixed really high like a pop song as opposed to a hardcore song. And it's kind of like a weird mix that like is very unique to Mineta, but part of me kind of like feels like, you know, the songs are good enough that they can stand alone without having to like necessarily always be insane with them.
Yeah, I'll go down that path with you, Bob, because I think that there are some moments where he's getting almost into Beach territory with these two.
Yeah, that feedback for sure.
Where it's almost just like noise with him on top. Yeah, so that's very true.
Should we go on to Otona Zenmetsu? I know we talked about it a little bit before.
Yeah, I mean, that one seemed to really affect Mike. It seemed to affect you more than me. I personally didn't really care for it just because I really liked the old one so much. And so this one seemed like a slowed down version of that. But I'm curious to see what you liked about it.
Yeah, I really love this version of it, actually. I think it's like a really creative way to go back to a song that is really one of Mineta's most simple. Most like, you know, he's taking this like hippie slogan in the original song, the Going Steady song, Don't Trust Over 30, the first song on Boys and Girls. He's taking this like hippie slogan for youth. And at the time he was, I think, like 22 or something when they recorded that record.
Yeah, pretty young.
Yeah. And so there was a degree of kind of earnestness to it. And returning to this idea of don't trust over 30 when you're almost 40 is a really bizarre idea to begin with. Yeah. But the way he approaches it is this, to me, it feels much more like, you know, he made that statement when he was young, and now he has become the adult that he said never to trust. And the song has become something different. It's become this thing of like, I don't even want to be an adult. I've never trusted an adult in the first place, but here I am kind of thing, is how it feels to me. And it feels to your point, Bob, about this being a really lonely record. I feel like this song in particular feels like the cry of someone who is totally alone. You know, someone who feels like they are totally disconnected from people their own age, and that the world is full of people who don't care and have no hearts, and he's just stuck there. And like, you know, the way the song opens up, this crashing explosion and the like, these super like syrupy synth parts that are just drowning the opening, this kind of like almost free jazzy opening. It really feels like at times Mineta's music feels like just the utter, like the sound of complete internal turmoil. This song, I think, really hits a lot of it, and in a way that feels mature, like the statement of a grown-up describing being really disappointed in grown-ups. And personally, as an adult in America right now, looking at the way a lot of the adults are behaving, it really resonates. I feel really equally disgusted with a lot of adults. And it's one of those things where it's like you've gotten older, but the authority figures have gotten no better.
I, for one, really don't like the new music on this song, but I do really like the sentiment of, I wrote this song when I was young and idealistic, and now I'm doing a record about how I'm old and just feeling really alone, feeling really lost. So I do like that sentiment, but the music just did nothing for me on this song. And I kind of feel like maybe it would have worked better as I'm going to play this song live as a tip of the hat, but I don't know if it adds anything to the record for me, aside from maybe like our deep dive nerd narrative creation.
Yeah.
This is the yin to the other record's yang, whatever. So
I will say this, that I don't know why this one made the cut and some of the other ones didn't. Like when I was, looking at some of the other B-sides from the singles that have come out, Like the B-side to Angel Baby, that song Nee Kaisen, I love that one. It's such a weird and funny, silly little song. And I love the fact that he's saying, kuso mitai ni Daisuki, which, he's like, I love the fuck out of you. And like, I think that that's a really cool song. And I actually kind of like some of the other ones too, like the B-side from Koi wa Eien. It's called Nijiku Sanju. I like that one. So it seems weird to me that this one made the cut and those ones didn't. It definitely must be something very deliberate, like that he wants to revisit some of those really, really early songs as a way to kind of show where he is now. That must be a very deliberate choice.
Did Don't Trust Over 30 begin with the same lyrics?
Yeah, I think the lyrics are all the same.
Okay. Because in this version, it seems to just take on this totally different significance. Like, I feel like being a kid and being like, why was I born? Why do I have to die? It feels sort of just like an insight into the strangeness of life. But stated now by this adult who sounds like he's still really like just trying every day to like survive internally sometimes. Like, it sounds like such a sincere cry out and, why do I start crying every time I see that evening glow? And like, I'm singing from the heart. Like, it just sounds so, like we've been saying, it's a really personal record. And it sounds like it comes from a different personal space to me. The decision to return to it now, I actually, this song in particular really sticks with me. I listen to it every time I listen to this record or some of the songs from this record.
You know what's interesting, Mike, about what you're saying there is that for a lot of his other songs, when he revisits them, he changes the lyrics to make them darker. And this one, it actually is darker just like precisely because he hasn't changed the lyrics, that he's still feeling these feelings now 20 years later, right. And that he still hasn't found any answer to them. Right.
Yeah, exactly. You get older, but the problems are still this feeling of like disconnection and like that there's no one really to trust or anyone who is like worthy of believing in, kind of like that feeling when you're an older person is a much more lonely feeling, I think.
It's very bleak, yeah.
I think we could really go deep on a topic like this with a song like Ikitai, but another song that I thought really concisely summed up this idea was the lyrics at the beginning of Angel Baby, where he's like, why am I always alone? I wish I was anywhere but here. And I think that kind of encapsulates the spirit of the record. Like, well, here I am still, pining for someone who doesn't love me, or here I am still lost. And in the middle of what might otherwise seem like just a simple, catchy pop song, I think that's a really powerful way of being like, boom, we're doing this. We could get into Ikitai a little if you guys want to. That one really goes places.
That's the song that I wanted to talk about the most. So, because I heard it when it came out as a single in 2016. I think that was their first single that came out after they had kind of disbanded. And this one is way more effective for me. Like, the piano playing is way more emotional. It has kind of these really nice rises and falls to it and stuff. And I think his vocals are very, very performative. He seems like he's almost on the verge of tears. And then that moment where he just shouts baby that kind of like just shocks you. So yeah, this one really, really hit home with me. This is the one that I listened to just over and over again. And I immediately just resonated with me, especially after looking at the lyrics. And like I said earlier, like some of these lyrics don't really make any sense. They're just more of like a feeling, like a general feeling that he creates. Like, where he says like, I turn into like a blob of black liquid and I feel this stinging sensation all over or something like that, But what he's getting at, the overall theme here, and this is something that I've heard him mention in other songs, is just this feeling of not being comfortable in your own skin and not wanting to continue being you and not understanding why you can't just be like everybody else. And, like he's saying, ikitai, ikitai, like I want to live. And he's also echoing things like he's saying, the darkness is so cold and I don't want to be in the darkness. And just by living and just by being myself, I wish I could shine and be beautiful. And these are things that he's said since the early days of Going Steady. You know, like, I want to be so beautiful.
Yeah.
And then and there's one line in Wakamono Tachi that always struck a chord with me, which is where he said, "Bukoroshite kure ore no naka no bakemono," right? So kill the monster that's inside of me. He's begging them, please kill the monster that's inside of me. And that's in the midst of like a really, really happy, positive song where he's shouting out to everybody, hey, we're here, let's do this. You know, and this is the one where I think he's really drawing that part out, where he's just saying, I have this something that feels like sin, something that feels like shame at being born that I've carried with me my whole life. And I feel like I need to punish myself. And if you don't think that, you're mistaken. And it just really, really strikes me as that's what it feels like to be depressed. That's what it feels like to wrestle with depression. And he's writing this song at the peak of his career. Like, he's on TV every day. Everybody here in this country knows him now. You know, he couldn't reach a higher level of success musically and in acting and in everything else. And he still is dragging that with him. Like, you know, the fact that he doesn't want to be himself. He doesn't want to be, I don't know, like he loves the movie, but he doesn't like the main character. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. One interesting thing I noticed about this song too is, you know, it starts out and then later on in the lyrics, it sounds like he's addressing someone. You know, he's like, at the beginning, he's saying, I've got something I want to tell you. You know, is there someone you love? Is there someone like sleeping beside you? You know, someone you think of when you're far away from each other? Like, and even when he's singing Ikitai, Ikitakute sa, you know, in the past, he may have been singing to a love interest or pining for someone through the song. But now it seems like he's confronting himself with these really uncomfortable ideas in the lyrics. So he's asking himself things like, you know, why are you unable to find love? Why are you unlovable? You know, yes, I do want to live. It's kind of like he has to proclaim it or state it in song form to be able to reach himself.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a really powerful song. And, you know, I had heard the original version when it came out in like 2016 and didn't really think about it that much. I don't know what it was about that one, but it didn't really stick with me. And maybe it was kind of like you were saying, Bob, just kind of at a time where you're kind of like, yeah, they're off on their weird thing. I'm not even on the same page anymore, you know? But this one, I was listening to it the first time and just started reading the lyrics along with it. And it was a really kind of emotional experience for me because a lot of the things that he's talking about, I feel like are really real and in a way that I haven't experienced a lot of people state in so simple of terms. Just this like this pain where you just feel like you have to say like, I just want to be happy, you know? And like, it's nothing more than that. It's just like him talking about being at the Shinjuku Love Hotel. And there's times, you know, he's talking about a lot of deeply personal stuff, but within it all, he's saying that he wants to be happy like the town of Shinjuku and he wants to be beautiful like the town of Shinjuku. And why can't I just be happy? It sounds to me like this, just this pure cry from the heart, almost to God in a way, like to whoever's listening, you know, like
maybe it's a prayer just to the void, just to anyone who's listening.
Right. And it feels really pure in that way to me. And in a way, it felt like being seen in like a moment where you just feel really vulnerable. And that I thought was really valuable, a really valuable experience. And he gets into some stuff in the song that are just really, you know, I haven't been there in such granular detail as Minna is describing in the song, but a lot of the feeling that he's describing, when I was reading the lyrics, I just felt immediately like I know exactly what you're talking about.
You know what I really identify with is when I've felt really bad depression, like at its worst, it's something that you were talking about, I think Bob and you, Mike, as well, is like that. He's saying ikitai almost like to kind of clear the air. And it's this idea that like in all of his songs, he never says he wants to die. He says he deserves to die or that he should die or that he doesn't deserve to live. But he never says that he doesn't want to live or that he wants to die. And so in this one, he's saying that like, I want to live, but I just want to live like everybody else, you know? And I think that's something that resonated with me is because I've never, like in my worst moments, I've never felt suicidal. I've never wanted to just, you know, I never wanted to die or kill myself, but I have felt like I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want to keep being, I don't want life to keep going the way it is. And that reassurance that like, you have to tell people, look, I want to live. to live, but I want to be beautiful, and I want this to be more than just how it can be sometimes, So
Yeah. That chorus is just so cathartic. That, especially by the end, that I'm saying I want to live. I might be ugly. I might be hard to look at. I just want to live. I want to try and shine. It's such like a plea almost, like to whoever will hear.
I was just going to say the lyric that I like the most out of this one is where he says, I'm afraid of radiation, and I'm afraid of earthquakes, and all of these things are scary, but the scariest thing in the world is that feeling that words can't express, that is some type of shame deep inside of me just for existing.
Yeah.
And he says it just very bluntly, exactly like that, and it's not even rhythmic. He's just like blurting it out over music, but it's so, I don't know. It's really cool. I really like the way he puts that.
I have a memory of, this is kind of going to get heavy. Do you remember that shooting in France where like a bunch of people got shot at that Eagles of Death metal concert?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember listening to the news and just like feeling fucked up. And I actually wrote a song that while it doesn't directly reference anything that was going on, it kind of inhabits the same headspace. And that verse you're talking about here, Adam, kind of sounds like that, like where he says, I'm afraid of earthquakes. I'm afraid of radiation. I'm imagining him writing this after that huge ass earthquake. Was that in 2011?
Yeah, it's 2011.
Yeah.
I could just imagine just being caught up in that insanity afterward. And these feelings of like the world around you going crazy, amplifying your own feelings of doubt and depression. The lyrics are just like super powerful. And to say it in the dumbest way possible.
Well, it's true. And I think a lot of the power comes from the simplicity of how he states it. Like, besides that one really kind of opaque lyric you talked about, Adam, that's kind of more like imagist than anything. Like, it's mostly really plain language, and really like it feels like just trying not to hide how you're feeling, but really trying to make it as clear and understandable as possible and give voice to this pain. And I would imagine it's probably really powerful for a lot of people who feel similar. I know, as someone who has experienced depression, it really I felt seen by it in a way.
Yeah. Before we move on to the next song, I just wanted to add a little bit of insight to this. So the piano on this one is different from the single. The piano here is being played by somebody named Dr. Kyon, who he appeared on the Kawarita Vibrators album, when they made their album Sex Shitai. And he's originally from a band called Bogumbos, which is a really awesome name.
That sounds like an off-brand Gumby character.
I thought it sounded like an old Louisiana, what's that music called?
Zydeco or something?
Zydeco band?
Yeah, like a Zydeco band, yeah. But yeah, the Bogumbos is a band from, they were active from 1987 to 1995, and kind of, weird folky stuff. And I think that he met...
You're cutting out a little, Adam.
Oh, I see here. Just a minute. I know what happened. My audio switched, and this is all going to be picked up on my mic, so just give me a second here. I think somebody just left in the car, and it switched my Bluetooth, so just give me a minute here.
Oh, got it.
I've actually got a funny story about that, so we may even actually, maybe worth keeping this in. All right, I've switched so my phone is paired to my Bluetooth headset, but it's also paired to my car and to another car, and it just switches whichever one comes on, right? So right now it's on my Bluetooth headset, but whenever somebody leaves this house, it switches over to the other one. And this happened the other day when I was parking. I was parking my car, and I paid the parking meter, and then it didn't actually let my car out. And so I called the number on the side, and I start talking to the assistant woman who's doing the assistance, and she says, "Okay, do you have a credit card?" Yeah. So put the credit card in, see if the bar raises and lets your car out. And so I did that. It let my car out. And then she said, okay, but please stay on the line until you're completely out of the parking lot so that we can be assured that you're out, and then we'll send you the money back to your bank account later on. And I said, okay. So as I'm getting out, I get in my car, and as soon as I turn it on, it switches to the Bluetooth in the car stereo. And then I can hear her coming through there. So I said, okay, I'm out of the parking lot. And she said, okay, I'll call you later and give you, we can set up how we're going to send the money back to you that you've already paid. And I said, okay, so I pushed the end button on my phone. But once it's gone into hands-free mode, the phone actually doesn't cut off. And so I assumed the phone had ended, and it hadn't. And so as soon as I'm like, okay, fine, thank you for your time. And I'm like, fucking son of a bitch. God. And I just go on this like spree. And then all of a sudden I just hear this like soft, Japanese woman's voice. Okyakusama, denwa tsunagatta mama desu ka? I was like, oh shit. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. And I hung up the phone, but it was super embarrassing. So that's my story about Bluetooth.
That's tight.
So yeah, anyway, we were talking about Bo Gumbos, and it's not that important, so we can move on to the next song.
So, we brought up how some of these songs are a collection of older songs, or like a lot of them are singles that already came out before the record.
Right.
So everything like between Hone and Ichigo no Uta, even though I love Ichigo no Uta, these songs kind of don't, they don't have as much soul, I would say, to them. Like, to me, they sound like Mineta flexing his songwriting muscles, in that he's like, I'm going to write a really good pop song, but I don't know how much of his heart is poured into these necessarily. They kind of don't have the same heft or meaning, I feel like Ikitai does. But I do think that the two songs after Ikitai, I feel like they kind of sound like him coming back up from the depression of Ikitai. Like, I think God Save the World. First of all, I love how it's kind of just like a New Order song. Like, it's like just like a really catchy pop song. And the lyrics in God Save the World are kind of just very observational and just kind of like, I'm back to my everyday life. Like, I'm making it through. And he's kind of like, it feels like he's coming to terms with, this is who I am. This is my life. And there's a lyric kind of near the end of the song where he's like, the end of the world is here, but I think we're going to meet again in the next life. I almost want this to be the end of the album, but then the next song after God Save the World is Alex.
Yeah.
And then Alex kind of does the same thing again. He's just describing what he's going through. There's lyrics where he's talking about like, Daisuki datta yo, like, I loved you. It's kind of like saying goodbye maybe to someone or maybe to what he had hoped for, but it doesn't sound sad to me. It sounds like he's just coming to terms. I think it's a really cool story arc, and I feel like the album ends real strong with these three songs.
Definitely. Personally, I couldn't think of a more perfect 2020 song than God Save the World, honestly. It was like driving around listening to that during the week after the election when it was unclear if the entire country was going to fall apart into civil war.
Yeah.
There's times where I was just listening to that and it felt like, again, just like this total like pure cry from the heart. Like, please, somebody, whoever is listening, just please make something go right, And
there's that lyric, make a wish, break the curse.
yes, yeah,
Please break the curse.
I love that lyric. That's a great chorus. Yeah, make a wish, break the curse is so powerful. And then I also love the Pokemon keyholder line. Just the way that sounds is like the way it sounds in the lyric works so well, and it's such a small detail. You very rarely hear anybody making reference to like keychains or Pokemon for that matter in song, but it's something you see every day all over the world and all the time, and it feels very like located in reality.
It's personal in a very like a John K. Samson type of way. I feel like it's noticing all the small details really paints a big picture.
Right.
In the case of these songs.
Yeah.
Right.
I was going to say, I really agree with you, Mike, that we need more songs about Pokemon.
Yeah, the poker rap was already great. We need a few more.
That's why I'm working on my my magnum opus, which is about Snorlax.
Don't say too much or someone is going to steal your idea.
I know. Yeah.
錆びた電信橋がポケモンのキーホルダー初めて会った時のことを覚えている
Like I was saying earlier, like the structure of the album it's very deliberate, it's very well thought through, it's well conceived, and it's well executed. So I do like the way that they that he finished it with 3 strong songs. And you know, the singles, like you said, I mean, they're not great, they're not bad, they're very you know, mid-album kind of songs. The Koi wa Ein, I do want to say that one, this is better than the single version, you know, and it's the first time he's done this duet with Yuki from Judy and Mary again in 15 years.
Yeah.
I do feel like it's a bit of a waste because they're such a cool combination together, her super high voice and his weird husky gravelly voice. And when they sang together on Kakunukete Station, that is like one of the coolest, most powerful combinations, like their 2 voices going together. And this one, I feel like they're kind of trying to recreate that and it falls flat. Like it's the song itself doesn't have the power that the other one had.
In Kakenukete Seishun, Yuki's verse, not only was it kind of just like, holy shit, the way her voice sounds transplanted into this song, like the sound of it was great, but also in the middle of this love song, she's singing like, I'm a vision that's inside your head. It kind of subverts this love song in a way that makes it sound like, Minetta, get over it. Like,
Yeah.
I think that was like what you mentioned earlier, where they re-record an old song, but they update it in a way that kind of adds more meaning or subverts it. And so this song, I'm kind of like, her voice sounds sick, but yeah, I don't think it's making the song any more special in a way.
Right.
Aside from her being like my favorite. I love Yuki. I love Judy and Mary so much.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. Before the song Hone, there's that song Amen Zamen Mary Tree, which is fucking weird. A really weird title for a song, and it doesn't even really have anything to do with this song itself. That song, though, now maybe this is just my brain, and I tend to like find these patterns, like musical patterns that remind me of other things. But that song reminded me a lot of the B-side from I Don't Want to Die. So the song Tohoku Shinkansen wa Chihiro-chan wo noseta. There's a very similar, I don't know, I don't want to hum the whole thing, but anyway, there's a similar kind of refrain in that. And then it's also a bit similar to the song Yume de Aetara. It kind of borrows bits from these other songs and puts them into there, which that could just be Minetta writing similar kind of melodies. But I know that he does tend to recycle melodies intentionally in other songs.
There's a third song which whose melody I think briefly appears in it, which is "There She Goes" by I don't think by Sixpence None the Richer originally, by The Laws or someone.
The Laws, yeah, the Laws are great.
Yeah, I think it's The Laws. Yeah, that part of the melody, the do 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 do, that part is kind of like a turnaround a little bit in that song too, and this song very much has that kind of jangly, kind of British sound. I think it's kind of going for it. I actually really like this song a lot, even though it does kind of pull from a lot of other songs. I think it's one that grew on me. I didn't like it so much at first, but I listen to it every time I listen to the record.
I think one thing about this song in particular, this one being the first one on the record that kind of fits that Britpop mold, is that, you know, Minetta's been kind of doing jangly music like this all the way back to like Friends on that on Boys and Girls.
Yeah.
But I think on Hikari no Naka ni Tatete ne, he like kind of flipped the switch and he made a song like Poadum.
Yeah.
And I thought that song was terrible. Like I'm not feeling that song at all. So something about this record, I think he really pulls it off. And, you know, he's like, I'm going to write more of my Stone Roses, my Jesus and Mary Chain worship songs. And I think he really pulls it off. And I don't know if your Pia articles that you were mentioning earlier mentioned this, but I guess he wrote some of the lyrics to this song when he was out in England. He played some shows with Pete Doherty from the Libertines in England, like maybe 2018, I think. It was a couple years back, and he wrote some of the lyrics while he was out there, and he mentions being in Manchester in the lyrics. And some of the lyrics are apparently dedicated to the singer Inoma from the band Onani Machine, who was sick with cancer and subsequently passed away. So he's, you know, I'm trying to find the lyric now. I started talking before I was prepared with the lyrics.
Yeah, that was mentioned in the Pia article, or I definitely remember reading that. Yeah, I think he died from mouth cancer or something like that, right? Or throat cancer or something like that.
Oh, so the lyric I was looking for is Boku ga ikiru made kimi wa shinanai de, which roughly translates to please don't die until I've lived. Almost a plea to his best friend, the Beavis to his butthead, that, you know, I can't do this without you. I need you here with me. And it's a really touching overture to his friend.
僕が生きるまで
Yeah, I think that song it really, really works, and it kind of it helps with the flow too from song to song. And I think in that regard, a lot of these songs, I think it's kind of almost classic Mineta with a bit of maturity. I will say this is something that not only that I felt, but my son said it right away after he listened to the album too, is that this song lacks the crazy, intense songs that they used to have. They used to have at least one on every album, and it doesn't have anything like that where it's just like completely letting loose from the beginning. And that could be because it doesn't have Abiko and Chin and Murai in the band. I don't know, but
I was just going to say, I think it could be a lot harder to cultivate that kind of energy when you're pulling from one person instead of from four for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know how much those people, the other guys are taking part in the writing at all. Maybe not at all.
I wonder, we mentioned it, we briefly talked about it with Chin, where, I heard that the band was practicing like 40 hours a week. Like Mineta wouldn't be there, but the other three guys would just be playing all the time. So when I listen to these songs, everything sounds competent, but I don't hear like Abiko playing like a solo throughout the whole song, which is kind of how his bass playing is.
Yeah.
It's just always just doing something really wild and cool.
Yeah.
And the way that Murai's drumming is so just ramshackle, but never goes off the rails. It's just Murai's playing is so weird and flavorful, and the same with Chin's guitar playing. So it's kind of like I hear these songs, and it's like I don't know if that element of danger is necessarily the songwriting itself, as it is just like these guys who can like mess around and fuck around, but they're so locked in with each other that they can always pull it off.
Yeah, even while they're body slamming each other and stuff on stage.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, that was always incredible. I mean, I do think that in that, I've brought it up a couple times, but in that kind of like free passage at the beginning of Otona, etc. I don't have it in front of me right now. I think that area does sound really good. I think all the players hang together really well in a section that has very little to go off of. They're essentially just doing like hitting the chords and having these dramatic swells happening. It comes across. I think that's the kind of thing that can easily sound like complete shit, like it's very easy to get that wrong. And I don't think that they did on this record. I think it sounds pretty good, actually. Yeah, I agree. I think like the band feel isn't the same, but I think the record is kind of doing something different. It's not what I expected. It's not necessarily what I wanted. I wish it was the Ging Nang Boyz, but I think that, in my opinion, I think it succeeds at being itself.
Ultimately, I think it's really cool. I think we can all agree on this, that, we went into listening to this record and came out feeling rejuvenated on the band. In the first episode of this podcast, I was like, the story for this band kind of ended for me in 2014, and I'm kind of like, I'm kind of already embarrassed at what I said. I was like, wow, I think it's really cool that the band can still make something awesome, and I can feel a little bit of that feeling of excitement again. Like maybe not to the same degree, but that could also be attributed to me being in a different headspace as a listener now than, having my mind blown at 19 years old or whatever. But, like Ichigo no Uta, I'll keep saying it, like, I love this song. Like if I made like a best of mix, like I'd be throwing that one in. Like this is my shit. Like this is something I want to listen to on repeat. So I think it's really cool that's happened again.
Yeah, honestly, same with God Save the World. I've listened to that song so many times. Like since we started listening to it for this, I listen to it almost every day. It's a great song, and I also feel really like kind of rejuvenated by it. I feel really impressed by how this album seems like it is a mature statement. Instead of going back, instead of trying to be exactly the same as before or trying to be youthful again, it seems like a pretty thoughtful and constructed statement of an adult still trying to find their place in the world.
I think it's a logical next step for the band, and when I think of it in that context, it sort of makes the last two albums make sense as well, because I think that those ones were it wasn't only like Mineta falling apart, but it was the band coming apart. It was the destruction of what it was, and this is kind of the next phase that makes sense. So
I think this album feels like the clouds of that breakup have begun to dissipate a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it also kind of helped me put into perspective the baggage I had as a fan going into the previous two albums, in that like I wanted that same feeling. I wanted the songs to strike me in the same way as Door and Kimi to Boku no did. And actually, even in doing this podcast before listening to the new album, even going back and listening to the last two records, I had fresh ears and kind of a fresh attitude, revisiting some of those songs. And I like these songs more. I like the thoughts that went into them, even though they didn't strike the same chord. And it's really cool. Like, they're still doing the damn thing, or Minetta's still doing the damn thing. And it's, I look forward to what he does next.
Yeah, I think this really showed he's still got some really surprising ways to kind of state the same things he's been stating.
I will say this real quick too. I mentioned earlier how like I saw the Hone video and I was like not feeling it. I think I also watched some YouTube live performances that he was doing, and his voice sounded kind of shot. Like, it didn't have the same husky quality to it. It was kind of more nasal sounding, which, like it or not, that's a very Japanese way of singing. I think a lot of Japanese rock bands have super nasal vocals.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of like, dude, what is Minetta's voice? Like, what is he doing with it? I was not feeling it. And then hearing this record, I'm like, no, his voice still sounds great. Like, that was another thing that pleasantly surprised me. I was getting ready to hear him sounding like Kermit the Frog or something, and just being like, dude, cut this out. Like,
he does kind of have a Kermit-y yell though. He has that Kermit. He has like this yell where he's going from the back of his throat.
Yeah.
There was a song on Hikari ni Tatete ne where he's singing like that almost the whole song. I can't remember which title that was, but you know what I'm talking about? He has that weird Kermit kind of sound to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was doing it on that record a little bit too, and I was just like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's the biggest problem that I have with the last record, is it sounds kind of affected. It sounds like there's a lot happening, and there's like a lot like that's trying to be done, but it's not really clear that it's all coming together right, and this record feels much more like they come out more naturally. The songs feel like they are coming from a really earnest place in this person, and they feel like it. I feel like there's a lot of genuine kind of emotional valence in these songs.
Yeah.
Sounds like we're all pretty down with this record.
I'm more down with this record now after having heard your guys' opinions on it, to be honest. Like, it was really cool, the opportunity to sit down and kind of digest something critically for the first time in a really long time. And I enjoyed that part of it. But just my own take on it, I wasn't nearly as positive about it as I am now, having actually heard from you guys and what you took away from it, because it kind of added some different, insight into it for me.
I'm happy to hear it.
If you guys could choose just one favorite song, what would it be?
I would say Ikitai for me.
Good choice.
Okay. I would...
Mike, it sounded like you were really into God Save the World earlier.
That's my first... honestly, this is kind of funny because I feel like both of you have kind of laid bare some criticisms, but the other two that I really like when I'm doing my short list that I drop in there tend to be Hone and Rotona. I tend to drop those three together, and I feel like those three create such a powerful atmosphere of like desire and lack of connection in this person, like this desire to connect and this desire to be loved, and it just, I feel like all those songs hang together in a way that to me feels really true, that I haven't heard on a record in a while.
Just to clarify my stance on Hone, I was talking a lot of trash about listening to the single and watching the YouTube video like 4 years ago, but I actually really like the new recording of it.
It's good
on this record. Something about it captured a good energy.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's good, and it's a little more. It's one of the more hokey songs on the record, I guess, because it's way more like, it's got kind of like a theme or like a running motif, kind of. But this feeling of desire that he's trying to put words to, I think a lot of people can relate to, and like this feeling of like that your desire is so big that it's bigger than you almost. I think he's still got some tricks for sure. He's still got it.
I think my favorite song on the record is Ichigo no Uta, which I've said probably like 4 times already.
Well, you like Strawberries, Bob.
Just a really cool pop punk song, and it indulges in a lot of like typical things that would be in like a like a Newfound Glory song or Paramore or something. But I'm like, man, if it works, I'm not going to hate on it. The little halftime part at the end, I'm just like, hook me up to the IV and inject me with this song. Like, I'm into it. I think it's really cool. All the ground he covers. I think God Save the World might be my second place though. Really cool song.
Yeah, I think that's my number one. That's probably my number one.
小さくて弱くてもつれて転んで泣いてた未来を抱きしめたいのに本当の言葉は
I guess one thing that I don't think we talked about much yet, but you brought it up a little bit, Bob, but I also think Alex is a great closer on this record. The way the song has space to kind of just vamp and kind of unfurl or unspool, I would say, like the way the song ends, it just kind of like lets itself run, feels like he's said goodbye, but it's such like a melancholy sounding song and it's such like a bittersweet song. It's really like a pretty beautiful.
Bittersweet's the perfect description.
Yeah, really, really like beautiful melody and really one of his more airy songs. It's not like buried under tons of distortion and everything. It ends on this really touching note, I think. It's a great closer. Yeah, great song.
Yeah, it's also really nice that he wrote such a nice tribute to The Secret World of Alex Mack, which is a really great Nickelodeon show. So
South Bay native Alex Mack.
Larissa Olenek.
Yeah.
That's right. The legends of everybody who knew somebody who went to high school with her were rife.
For me, I would hear people like D Squared talk about like, I saw her at the Campbell Gaslighter at the ska show.
Was she liquid metal at the time, or was she like corporeal?
She's like rocking out as a puddle of like mercury.
Ew, you got liquid U on me.
Well, her dad is T1000, you heard, right?
Yeah, for sure.
This is some good Ging Nang Boyz criticism we got going on right now.
All right, yeah, we clearly don't know how to end this episode. So.
All right, let's stop it there.
Thanks for listening to Dog People. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at DogPeople666, where we'll be posting supplemental photos and such for each episode. If you like what we're doing here, help us spread the word by sharing the show with a friend or two. Also, check out Adam's other podcast, Searching for Grog, wherein three brothers try to reconstruct their childhood memories of a road trip involving sledding accidents, freak hailstorms, confessions of love, and an arcade game about cavemen playing golf. Shout out to some of our other favorite music podcasts out there. Better yet, a long-form interview podcast covering the best artists from the extended DIY punk community. Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda, and As You Were, a podcast about Alkaline Trio, both of which inspired us to do something similar. And the In Defense of Ska podcast by our old friend Aaron Carnes.